Another wave of lockdowns has begun, and that is really bad news for the US economy. The first wave of lockdowns resulted in the permanent closing of more than 100,000 US businesses, colossal lines at food banks around the nation, and the loss of tens of millions of jobs. Needless to say, this new wave of lockdowns will make things even worse. The first wave of lockdowns certainly didn't stop the spread of the virus, and more lockdowns will not stop it from spreading either. And now 3 separate scientific studies have shown that COVID-19 antibodies disappear very, very rapidly, and that means that a vaccine is not going to end this crisis and we will never reach a point of herd immunity. So we are going to have to find a way to function effectively as this virus circulates around the globe year after year, because it isn't going to go away. We simply cannot shut down the economy every time the number of cases starts to surge again. The damage that we have already done to the US economy has been incalculable, and now these new lockdowns will do even more damage. Welcome back to the Atlantis Report. You are here for your daily dose of the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Please take a second to smash that like button. And as you know, friends, I rely totally on your donations to keep this channel functional. As you know, it takes a crazy amount of research and time to bring you this content on a daily basis, so I hope you consider helping with whatever donation you can afford. Thank you. The current global economic system is based on the hyperglobalism and selective capitalism that has evolved from Adam Smith's classic emancipatory capitalism into selective globalism that is supported by the IMF, the World Bank, and WTO and is dominated by the neo-imperial elite. This neo-imperial elite that is less than 1% of the global population owns most of the global economy and orchestrates sinister designs to dominate global politics, mold social values, and control the economic system. This elite creates recessions, initiates wars, funds global conflicts, and coordinates revolutions across the globe. On several occasions, this elite seems to defy each other, but this is just a phantasm to cheat the world. It works in a close-knitted global network that secures their interests and helps them to scratch each other's back. They have dexterously exploited the COVID-19 global pandemic lockdowns to oppress the small businesses that have limited resources and cannot endure the shockwaves of indefinite lockdown. The $2 trillion US federal bailout signed by President Trump is the largest in the US history, yet small business owners who were supposed to get the lion's share are exempted in the first round of disbursement. Diaz 2020. This research is the out-and-out analysis of the contemporary global economic structure, how it works, who are its key players, and how this financial system has damaged the planet and its inhabitants. Moreover, this document critically analyzes the damage that has already been done and proposes a solution that may replace the current financial malpractices. It may also bring transparency, equality, and equal opportunities for small businesses against multinational giants and thus establish freedom, justice, and equality at the workplace. Gradually, conventional war and its artillery are being replaced by psychological media warfare, and this time its artillery is COVID-19. It is impossible to believe that all this noise in the news is true because everyone knows that news produced by media companies is controlled by central banks and pharmaceutical companies. Our common sense questions that how could a virus travel around the world and hit hard all countries without affecting the 2 biggest cities besides Wuhan, Beijing, and Shanghai. The Chinese government did not close the country on the first day of the virus's discovery. If this virus is as dangerous and contagious as the media keeps telling us, then why has it not spread to all the regions of China, especially when China has the fastest and transportation networks in the world? Every day, this virus kills thousands of people around the world. This is nothing new. Influenza viruses have been doing this for very long. The lockdowns are directly in the interest of the global elite because since 2009 global economy is contracting and the fiat financial system is doomed to fail sooner or later. The current lockdown situation would create a global food crisis. Governments would have no option but to resort to blame game for governance failure. For example, America is blaming China for the spread of the virus and China is doing exactly the opposite. A recent report presented to Chinese President Xi Jinping reveals that anti-China sentiments have risen to an unprecedented scale and have never been this high since the Tiananmen Square massacre of 1989. The report has anticipated that this could lead China to an armed conflict with America. so the war is the only escape. But as both superpowers have developed enormous military bases across the globe, the war would be the deadliest war of human history, with the possibility of nuclear carnage that would surely endanger the prime interests of the global elite. So they would not let countries resort to violence. Instead, they would psychologically motivate the global leadership to introduce the new economic model that would give them unprecedented power. The economic model would be followed by the number of legislations across the globe that would force every citizen to be vaccinated at gunpoint. This fifth-generation cutting-edge nanotechnology might bring nanochips with them that would have the two-way communication and might give colossal control over human lives. It might transmit our life information, what we like, what we don't like, what we want, and what we don't want. Ghost servers placed overseas may record all this information and sell it to multinational companies that unleash directed ads and products in our lives, limited our ability to think, decide, progress, and enjoy the natural freedom. So, it can be said that this virus is considered as Jehovah's nail, and carries out the currently required duty. The global elite is 1% of the world's population and owns 99% of central banks and shares of global stock exchanges, which qualifies them to own different kinds of companies. For example, they own large shares in the military-industrial complex corporations, pharmaceutical-industrial complex corporations in all its aspects, especially the vaccine sector. Besides, they own a lot of shares in Google, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Instagram, CNN, MSNBC, plus all news channels that are censoring dissent, independent research, and new information on COVID-19. Moreover, this elite owns the technology companies including up-to-date communication nanotechnology that would be operated through 5G technology. The unprecedented scam. This neo-imperial elite has extended its long tentacles to every corner of the world. They have established a neo-feudal global empire where a few controls the global production, labor, and trade. This pandemic lockdown is an opportunity to critically analyze and smash this brutal capitalism that has environed our lives. For example, we can present a novel global economic model that could help the running of the global economy in a more inclusive and egalitarian fashion. Humans have not been moved by fancy dialectic arguments and speeches but have always learned from major disasters, for example, the World Wars, the Great Depression, and the Black Death. The global elite class that includes Chinese and the Western investors who own banks, global business, and the stock market, are the ones who committed the crime and the deceit of COVID-19, simply because all of their interests have become so intertwined. Think for a while. China discovered the COVID-19 in December 2019. The imposed countrywide lockdown throughout the first 3 months of 2020, they had around 100,000 COVID-19 patients. Why CIA and NSA did not convince the Trump administration that they should impose immediate lockdown in New York, the house of Wall Street parasites? Because they did not let it happen, they simply did not allow the lockdown. This is one of the critical decisions that should have been taken beforehand that could have saved hundreds of thousands of civilians. Should not this utter negligence and mismanagement be investigated? Should not the responsible people be brought to justice? It was allowed to increase numbers that would psychologically convince the American public that the new financial measures were necessary and inevitable against the COVID-19 global pandemic that allegedly had destroyed the whole global economy. This is the master plan of the upcoming sinister global order. Let's discuss here a very unusual incident to support our argument. Tanzanian President John Magufuli, having a university master's degree in chemistry, doubted the testing process and imported kits when positive cases rose from a few hundred to several thousand within a few days. To check the credibility of the testing process and kits, he deliberately sent some animal blood samples to the biggest and most credible lab of the country without exposing the origin of the samples. The results were astonishing. All animals were COVID-19 positive. He ordered the army to confiscate all testing kits and exposed the scam on global media, but mainstream media ignored this big scam that was desired to increase the numbers of the patients to psychologically choke the global community. Al Jazeera 2020. If this is true for one country, then this can be true for the whole world, as there are a few service providers who export medical equipment and testing kits, mostly based in China and the United States of America. It is worth noting that the tool and the front end of this crime are the so-called World Health Organization, hence the event is given a formal and legal character. The activities of this organization and its direct or indirect funding must be investigated. All this noise and hysteria underlying this virus is essentially psychological warfare for an economic purpose whose aims are a. Exploit the rest of the real economy in the hands of small stakeholders, b. Exploit the remaining livelihoods of people like farmers, c. And the most important is to restart their criminal usurious financial system for the benefit of global feudalism that hasn't been seen in the history of mankind. The building of the neo-imperial global empire after the end of the 30 Years' War in Europe, the Peace of Westphalia was signed in 1648 that gave birth to the modern nation-states. Most of the economy at the time was based on agrarian feudalism and state-sponsored mercantile enterprises. After the imperial onslaught and conquering of the New Worlds in the Americas and Australia, the global economy shifted from feudalism to imperial capitalism that gave birth to the new middle-class bourgeoisie who emerged as major entrepreneurs. This era was characterized by a free global economy that had little or no trading barriers. This gave birth to a new elite who relied on global trade. Haywood 2011, 29-32. In the second half of the 18th century, the concept of perpetual peace forwarded by German philosopher Immanuel Kant, the free market economy, and the classic capitalism proposed by David Ricardo and the Scottish economist Adam Smith, revolutionized the global politics and trade. The late 18th century was characterized by the American and French revolutions, which gave birth to the modern world, which had core human values of freedom, justice, and equality. The 19th century was overwhelmed by imperial conflicts, so the national borders and trade routes were ever-changing and dynamic. The socialist creed, which has been evolving throughout the 17th and 18th century, took the concrete form when Karl Marx wrote Communist Manifesto, followed by his Das Kapital. He proposed the concept of division of labor and alienation of production. Skidelsky 2016, 28-34. He urged the workers of the world to unite against persecution because they had nothing to lose but their chains. This initiated the global age of communism. The early 20th century saw massive imperial wars like the Opium Wars, Sino-Japanese conflict, Balkan Wars, and the imperial enterprises of Italy and northwestern Africa. But the initiation of World War I shocked everyone, which unleashed the unimagined havoc on humankind. The end of this conflict was supposed to end all future global conflicts, but the controversial and humiliating Versailles Treaty not only sowed the seed for the future conflicts but also sealed the human fate for another 50 years. Communism emerged as a force to be reckoned with in the USSR under the leadership of Vladimir Lenin in 1917. President Woodrow Wilson urged his European colleagues to follow the fancy ideals of freedom, justice, and equality, but failed to convince his Congress to join the League of Nations. The Great Depression, 1929, which was initiated on the Black Tuesday, when millions of shares changed hands in a single day, destroyed the whole global economy and plunged humankind throughout the 1930s. The so-called modern free market economy. President Roosevelt introduced his New Deal, 1933-1939, in 1933, which was supposed to bail out small businesses by giving them the loans at lower interest rates. The New Deal increased the government spending by manifolds. This so-called New Deal was a major blow to small businesses as it strengthened and equipped big Wall Street sharks. It further laid the foundation of the military-industrial complex in the United States. World War II, 1939-1945, was another dreadful event of human history that inspired the establishment of the United Nations in October 1945. The UN, IMF, and the world were supposed to keep a balance, but they failed against the ruthless onslaught of neo-feudalism. These institutions often served as handmaiden of these new feudal lords who aspired to overshadow the whole world. The post-war era was characterized by capital communist tussle, which preoccupied the Western economic lords who started a new Cold War that aimed to defeat communism. After the fall of the Berlin Wall and collapse of the Soviet Union in the 1990s, the World Trade Organization along with major economic groups like the G7 and G20 established a new imperial empire, or the New World Order, which serves the interest of its brutal neo-feudal masters. President Eisenhower and President Kennedy warned us about the sinister designs of the military-industrial complex and secret societies who were planning to enslave the whole capitalist economy. This is now an open secret that a neo-feudal club of elite rules the globe. This global elite destabilize countries, wage wars, and fuel conflicts to secure their interests. Chomsky 2017, Making of the Modern Kings. This neo-feudal onslaught of brutal capitalism that has swallowed several million people and destroyed almost half of the globe's resources is unstoppable. The annual GDP of several multinational corporations surpasses the total GDP of many developing countries. For example, Apple, Microsoft, and Walmart have earned more than half of the world's developing countries' annual GDP. Fernando Belinchon 2018, global leaders need to act to narrow the gap between the haves and have-nots. They should urge the global institutions and enterprises to follow balanced trade policy. They should renew the trade agreements that facilitate the small businesses and force the global elite to play by the rules and follow international standards. Multinational companies are mostly owned by Wall Street tycoons who invest in developing countries with loose regulation to huge capital by damaging the environment that in return causes colossal climate change that respects no boundaries. The influential banking system and global politics are designed to secure better fiefs for themselves. The United Nations report indicates that globalization, led by neo-feudal elite and imperial multinational companies, is not working for most of the planet. World's 20% rich people enjoy 86% of world resources and create 85% of world pollution, while the rest 80% have only 14% of the world's resources and contribute only 15% in global pollution. The social security and welfare policies of developing countries are molded by the IMF and the World Bank that put the working class at great risk. Collins 2015, Wall Street Parasites. The prominent political philosopher Noam Chomsky in his book, Who Rules the World, critically examined and explained that who pulls the string from behind the curtain and rules the world through politicians. He says that the Wall Street parasites are the real culprits who own everything we have and everything we can have. Chomsky 2017, as Noam Chomsky puts it, they have enormous resources and colossal political power at their disposal. There is nothing they cannot achieve. They control world media, banking system, financial transactions, military, and trade agreements. They can wage wars, destroy nations, and create new realities. In short, they have godly powers and they use them to achieve their goals. The evil of the worn. The investment bankers and our new kings are the masters of money, represented by private banks and their tyrannical companies in the stock exchange. They are mysterious people who have no identity or homeland, and most of the temptations of the land and its wars are funded by them. Disorganized and divided, we cannot stand up to such an evil, unless we introduce a system that administrates by justice and equality for all humanity, especially in the workplace. The perpetual solution, again, is democracy in the workplace. The first thing you need to know about Goldman Sachs is that it's everywhere. The world's most powerful investment bank is a great vampire squid wrapped around the face of humanity, relentlessly jamming its blood funnel into anything that smells like money. Matt Taibbi, award-winning investigative journalist. The assessment of the damage done. The laissez-faire of capitalism was supposed to encourage free trade, while the developed countries have placed the number of restrictive taxes that paralyze the so-called free economy. The global economy is delightful for investors and managers, but it is increasing the gap between the rich and the poor. It steals away millions of jobs from developing countries. For example, America lost 3 million jobs and billions of dollars to the economy because of global trade. The workers in the developing countries work in substandard conditions with no proper tools and safety measures. They are under constant fear of losing their job as they have no job security. Workers fail to make living in developing and developed countries, while the managers, investors, and CEOs have unrestrained power and boundless money to control everything. Saval 2017, they have no regard for environmental degradation. For example, Europe has banned coal production, but China and India have live coal mines and coal power plants, so they provide the cheaper power supply. This was the Atlantis report. Please like, share, leave me a comment, subscribe. And please take some time to subscribe to my backup channels. I do upload videos there too. You'll find the links in the description box. You will also find a PayPal link if you want to make a donation. Thank you wholeheartedly to all those of you who have already donated. Stay safe and healthy, friends.